So while I'm waiting to figure out what I'm going to do with the turbo itself, whether I just get a new one or try and clean and rebuild the one I've got, we'll get on to getting into the timing belt stuff now. So one of the first quickest things is to get the airbox out of the way. Mainly just to give a little more space. And also to allow access to the timing cover, timing plug, check plug that's in the belt housing. You need to be able to see straight into the hole to be able to line up the marks. So getting this out of the way helps with that. So we'll do that. And the mass airflow sensor plug, and it also has a vacuum line attached to it. And I think that's about it for this side of the engine bay for now. And so next thing is to get this intercooler to intake pipe off and out of the way so we can get to the timing cover and whatnot. And there is down here, you can see there's 2 clamps on that chunk of pipe. Right, where's my finger? Right there. The left hand side is a squeeze clamp. From factory, both of them are squeeze clamps. Somebody got smart on this one and put a gear clamp on it and actually put the screw up so you can get it undone without having to remove the washer fluid jug and a bunch of other stuff. I don't think it was me on this one, but definitely smart to change that to a gear clamp. It's enough of a problem just trying to get this pipe out with the fuel lines and everything, so don't make it any more difficult on yourself than you have to. It's usually a good practice to unmount the power steering reservoir just so that it can be moved out of the way a little bit. And also the engine mount that's right underneath the hoses there has to be disconnected, so that helps with that as well. So right down there is, I believe, the only mounting screw for the reservoir. So we'll pull it out and see how much hose flex we actually have to give us a little more space to work. They do not give you very much hose to work with because, of course, you're not supposed to do what I'm doing. So that will let us get to those engine mount bolts a little easier. So as far as timing belt goes, we're getting close to getting started with the actual covers and valve cover themselves. You can access the crank bolt. When we're ready to actually get going, I'll crack the crank bolt loose while everything's still together. The serpentine and everything gives a little more friction to try and hold it still. I'll use my big battery impact gun and then just snug it back up so that we can turn the engine with it, because you got to be able to turn it around to line up the timing marks to be able to start. Then the serpentine belt's got to come off and the tensioner's got to come out of the way and engine mount so we can get the timing cover and everything off. Actually, I think that might be able to come off without doing any of that, but we'll keep it covered up until we're ready to get into it. The valve cover's got to come off, which means the vacuum pump, which I don't think you can see over here. The vacuum pump's got to come off, and there's an O-ring under there that'll have to be replaced. Valve cover comes off. We got to get the front end camshaft bearing, whatever you want to call it, just the bearing cap. That's a bearing cap. off of the top to be able to do the camshaft seal. And actually, in the case of this time around, which is different than normal because I'm putting a different camshaft in, we'll actually end up pulling all of the caps to be able to change the shaft. And the shaft should be identical to the original one as far as mounting goes, so there shouldn't be anything extra special to do other than put some oil on the new shaft to make sure it's not dry, and assemble that up. And the little block that we made to do the valve timing for the camshaft goes in the rear end of the camshaft. So another reason why we got to have the valve cover off and out of the way, and then you use feeler gauges either side, which we'll talk about later on, to set the valve timing relative to the crankshaft, relative to the injection timing, and they all have to be within a certain spec for it to run at its best. Not that it won't run otherwise, but if you want the best performance and economy out of it, then it needs to be set properly. With the stage 2 camshaft, then I will afterwards, and we're going to have a new turbo hopefully, so we don't have to worry about that. With a new camshaft in there, or stage 2 camshaft in there, I'll get a stage 2 tune done, and I'll get them to adjust it to match with the camshaft, and also get it to turn the EGR off all the way once the car's warm, and possibly get them to do a fast idle, because these turbos are not supposed to idle any longer than 3 minutes. Otherwise the oil starts to leak past the seal, which is why I have trouble with the turbo that was on here, because the previous owner would let it idle for a long time. So a whole bunch of things all at once we're going to try and do. I think for now we'll leave the timing as is. We're pretty close on that. I can do the crank bolt anytime. The timing cover can come off anytime. The valve cover can come off whenever, other than it's open and dirt can go in there. So I think for now though, let's get the intake manifold off, because by the look of it I should do a cleaning on it while we're this deep into the engine anyways. So we'll do that, and that'll also give a little more access with the valve cover and the timing part of it as well. We will also at some point have to address that cap screw that I couldn't get out of the exhaust cooler pipe, or exhaust cooler pipe. And I will find some new cap screws from a car that we've stripped to replace those and any other ones that are rusty, and also clean and anti-seize everything so that it can be undone easily in the future. So the biggest thing with the exhaust cooler itself right now is I don't really want it hanging on the coolant hoses, but it needs to get out of the way so we can get the intake off. So what can we do here? Will it hang? It's not too bad. Okay. And as for the intake itself, they are internal hex cap screws, just like a lot of the other ones. And there's just one row, which makes life easier. It's not top and bottom of the passage instead of the way the exhaust manifold is. The exhaust manifold has 2 separate gaskets, each one covers 2 ports. So those will be at least 6, if not 7 mil. So I think everything's clear, so let's buzz those out, get the intake off, and can start the process of cleaning it probably as well. Might as well, if we're going to put a new turbo on or whatever and start fresh, might as well make sure everything is spick and span. The EGR obviously was causing problems with blocking the air when it felt like it. So new EGR, which is going to be fairly pricey probably because the aftermarket suppliers are out of stock, and Volkswagen wants like $520 Canadian for an EGR, so that's going to be not a good time. And a new turbo will probably be about $1,200 plus the hardware kit, and of course all the gaskets that go with all of this. Intake, exhaust, EGR cooler. Wow, look at those. Intake, manifold bolts. Will it focus for me? Of course not. Come on. Anyway, they're like brand new. Still got that funky gold plating on them. Which should be, I guess, because they don't get cooked nearly as much. Time to come off. Okay. Is it free? Nobody knows. A bunch of cedar just fell out of the... Okay, maybe not the inside. That's always good. I lost the gasket. I think I also saw a little nut fall. So that was interesting. But what's good to see is that the ports here are not too badly occluded, which means the ports on the engine block won't be too bad either in comparison to this, which again, I don't know if you can be able to see because the light is always bad. But here, let's try this. There. So yeah, fair bit in there. Still not, again, like I said before, still not anywhere near as bad as it could be. My dad has opened them up before and there's been nothing but like a 1/4 inch hole through the intake. And I can check here with the mirror how bad the ports are themselves. Let's get this away. Goes. Okay, not that we're going to reuse it anyways. So there is some that I'll probably try and just scrape loose and use a vacuum cleaner to suck it out, because like we said, we don't want it going into the intake, into the cylinders, if we can avoid. I can try and show actually here. See how well I can operate a mirror and a camera at the same time. So there is some buildup, a little more than 1/8 of an inch top right there. And same thing there, top and bottom. So again, it's not bad, it could be a lot worse. What's in my way? Come on. But yeah, we'll just do a little bit of a cleanup on that so that we are starting completely fresh. Clean turbo, clean intake. Fresh timing belt and water pump and everything, because I want this car to be no maintenance for the next however many years I can get out of a 160,000 kilometer timing belt, which for me will probably be 5-6 years, likely. 25, 4, 1, 6, so that'd probably be more like 8 years for me, because I don't do more than probably 15,000 kilometers a year. And normal is about 25, so your 160 gets you, if you did 25, your 160 gets you just over 6 years. 6.5 almost. So, but anyways, I don't want to be dealing with any of this. The turbo should never have had to have been touched in the first place. The only reason it's a problem is because it was not operated properly. Both my parents' cars are at 500,000 and have original turbo, original injectors, original injection pump, and have never been touched and work perfectly. Never touched the actuator, original wastegate actuator. So it all comes down to how it was operated and how it was maintained, and whether it has the belly pan and the top covers and everything like it's supposed to, which keeps the road dirt out of it a little longer, a little better. Probably the reason the EGR is bad and the butterfly sheared off is because it's so badly caked with carbon and oil, because I'm sure the intercooler is full of oil from, again, idling before I owned it. So again, once I get it all done and put together, we'll hopefully have a fast idle so that if it idles more than 2 minutes, it'll take the RPM up to 14, 15, 1600, so the turbo's spinning fast enough that the oil slinger can do its job. And we'll see with the updated camshaft and the tune, it might be better in any case to just shut it off, because probably excessive idling will start to build up extra fuel as well. So we don't want that either. And I might at some point, just for fun, pull the injectors out and just check. I don't know if our injector tester for the Mark IIs will go high enough pressure to do these ones. But if it will, I'll just do that. I'll pull them and check that, number one, it's a nice atomized cone spray, and number two, that the pressure that it's blowing off at is close to what it's supposed to be. The car starts great in the cold and has pretty good power when, of course, everything else is working that's supposed to be. So I don't think there's anything wrong with rings or injectors or pump. So we won't touch those unless they're a problem. At some point, it'd be nice to change the power steering pump. I'm sure it is the cause of the extra kind of ticking noise that it makes at idle, but not a high priority. Power steering works. So yeah, I think we're pretty good. Maybe put these intake bolts back in just for now, so that if I could see where the holes are, it would be great. Just for now, so that we don't lose anything. I try to always put bolts back in the holes if at all possible. They're gonna have to come out to do the intake cleaning probably, but I also can't thread it in looking in a mirror apparently. All right. I guess realistically the EGR can come off as well, other than it's going to be a major pain to try and undo those vacuum lines. They probably need to be replaced on the car anyways. If those start to leak, then nothing's going to work properly and the computer's going to be like, what the heck is going on? We'll need a jack under the oil pan with a block of wood at some point to be able to remove this front engine mount, because you have to take it right out of the way to be able to do the belt at all. So we'll get into that as well. But yeah, other than that, still beyond, of course, the big turbo replacement and timing belt job, I also have new complete tie rod assemblies, like I mentioned, that we will hopefully fairly easily swap, which actually would be really good to do the passenger side while there's this gaping hole here that you can actually get to it. The driver's side is going to be a bit more of a challenge, but it's a big hex nut for the inner tie rod end that you have to undo and do up, so we'll have to do that. And other things while we're to this point, what was I thinking of? We're going to replace we have to replace the pressure line for the turbo. We're going to replace the return line because it's looking pretty crusty and I don't want it to start leaking at any point. Probably in the next few years we're going to have to replace most of the coolant lines. I already had to do one of the little ones along the back of the engine there because it ruptured. But yeah, I just want this car to be reliable and not needing any maintenance anytime soon, other than basic stuff, oil changes, brakes. so that I don't have to spend a week doing this again. So yeah, I got some other stuff that I got a while ago that I'd like to get on the car. I got some Rally mud flaps. I've got my fancy set of summer rims that I bought. They're down at my school apartment right now. But after this job, I'll put the painted steel summers on, and then we can get an alignment done once we have new tie rods that can actually be adjusted. And we've got new control arms. The passenger side sway bar link mount on the control arm, the welded nut broke on me after I just put the new control arm in, so I got another replacement arm, no charge, they just replaced it, put that one in, and I found when I took the car apart this time that the bolt was loose again. So I don't know what the problem is with that. I might have to up the torque value from what it says it's supposed to be because it doesn't want to stay put. But we'll mess around with that a bit and hopefully get it so it's not making clunking noises. It may also still need the rear axle pivot bushings, which that'll be another day because that's a big job too, a big pain in the butt. But if your car is making a clunking noise, I think it's mainly on bumps. If it's a sharp clunk sound, it's probably the rear swing arm bushings, which yeah, they're not a nice thing to do. But that'll answer what your problem is maybe. The clunking I had on this car in the front was the rear control arm bushings, the puck-shaped ones. The rubber had separated from the outer sleeve, so the arm was able to bang up and down and hit the subframe, which was making the metal clunking noise I was getting. You may also get that noise from strut bearings. These guys here. Of course, it won't go low enough. There we go. These guys here. There's a rubber bushing between the car and the strut, and there's also a bearing in there so that you can turn the wheels. If you ever turn the wheel and there's a spring twanging noise, it means the bearings are also done. It's trying to turn the spring with the strut, which is not supposed to happen. Or sorry, turn the spring with the car, which is not supposed to happen. So if you get a twanging noise when you turn the wheel all the way, then that'll be what that is. But yeah, other than that, once we're done all this, we should have a good, reliable, fairly powerful. I'm really waiting to see what the new camshaft sounds like and also what it does for power. Now, the biggest problem with this whole operation is we're changing too many things at once. The turbo was a problem. The intake was a problem, that EGR blocking itself off, just occluded intake, period. So we're fixing all of that, and we're also putting a different camshaft in at the same time, so it's going to be kind of hard to tell what actually made the main difference. But as far as sound goes, we should be able to tell right away, starting it up with the new camshaft in it, whether it's made a difference or not. And then of course, when we get the tune done, then it should have a bit more power. It won't be much, but it'll also get them to make the tune mirror the camshaft and hopefully do a couple other cool little things for us. If we can get the number one, the tune on a switch, and number two, the fast idle on a switch, that would be cool. I don't have the appropriate software to make modifications myself. I would like to at some point, but I also prefer just mechanical diesels, much simpler, easier to work on. You don't have to have a computer or scanner to do things, but you're limited on power, of course. So yeah, project scope for this. It's not really a project, it's the daily, but might as well do some fun things with it while we can.